every day we have to replace uncertainty with hope. I do not like to be boxed. I tell people not to call me Lavish. That's not my name.
How did you come across bridal styling? When you came, there wasn't really much of that in Nigeria.
There were already designers, planners who sold accessories, but there was no bridal stylist. Fashion was something that I was born in. I remember giving fashion advice to my friends at 10 years old. I remember calling them and sitting them down saying, see, you need to stop wearing dresses. Dresses are for little girls. As much as Lavish is a well-known brand, it's great and it's solid part of my life. It is not who I am. Some of the big fashion designers, a lot of times when they want to sort of come up with a new collection, they would travel. They would just distance themselves so that things become a bit more clear. When you start looking at things that are happening, that's the only thing your mind is able to produce. You're not able to innovate. You're not able to create anything new or be original. The originality comes from being in touch with your actual self, not being in touch with the internet.
Just a quick message before we dive into today's episode. I found something interesting in our data, which showed that only about 25% of our viewers are actually subscribed to the channel. If you've been enjoying the content that we're creating, if you've been finding it exciting or learning something new, I have a little favor to ask of you. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, as it goes a long way in helping us deliver more exciting episodes like this and create more valuable content. You're amazing.
So Temi, how are you doing today? It's good to have you on the Hungry Creative Podcast. Can you briefly introduce yourself to our people?
Okay. Hi, Fee. How are you doing? My name is... Awesome. So my name is Temitope Kayode-Ojo, and I am the founder and creative director at Lavish, formerly known only as Lavish Bridal, but now we do more than bridal. I also founded a retail platform called Style. So yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you. And I think you're your very first fashion related guest. We've always had other people in the creative, in the design, and I think we've had one person in like the finance sector, but you are the first person in the fashion business, and I'm so happy about that. I think that's part of why I was so persistent on having you on the session. And thank you for coming. I'm so happy that you're here, and thank you for seeing through. I know how difficult it was to get you here with your your schedule, having to travel, having to get your business up and running and all that. And I can imagine how rigorous it is, but I'm glad you're finally here. So just in a brief way, you've mentioned founding businesses, you mentioned Style, you mentioned Lavish Bridal, which I'm happy to have been part of. So if I circle back to like the very beginning, I remember that point when you had it all as an idea, and I remember some of the meetings that we had that time. And I think one thing that was very peculiar about your brand, right? Because I saw a very strong character there, was that you were very intentional about what you wanted from that very go. I remember you trying to hold my hand to draw the logo, literally.
I don't even remember that. Sounds like me.
I'm saying literally, we were not seeing each other, but we didn't even have Zoom or anything then.
Yes,
but it was
no
via
video.
calls and no video, no you held my hand, you're exactly like this. This is exact me. I was trying to explore, and you're no. This is this one, and now I get it. I see how you've now scaled that style. It's a very minimalist and very clean aesthetic style that you've now scaled across all your other brands. So tell me about that. I feel like you were quite intentional, like I said. So how did all that come from? Where did you get that sense of specific it was exactly what you wanted? How did you find that that thing?
So I think a huge part of my journey as a creative and as a business person is self-awareness. I think that we're all created very beautifully. We're all created very differently, and I think that it's our difference that makes us amazing people or amazing creatives. And so if you don't know what that difference is, then you can't be, you can't communicate that, you can't express that, you can't show that. And you can't even, give that to someone else. So self-awareness is a huge part of being a creative. I don't think you can be a creative without being self-aware. You have to know who you are. You have to know what your strengths are. You have to know, how you perceive things. You have to understand it, and you have to accept it before you can sort of go. So I think that's why when I get to anywhere, I'm very particular about what I want to see, especially when I have been hired for that very thing. A lot of people that come to Lavish Bridal, they're hiring us for our creativity, which means that they've seen something, and that thing has to be delivered every time. So you first have to know it, accept it, and then you have to be able to, express it. Yeah.
How did you get to that point where you're like, okay, this is really what I stand for? Like, this is my character, like personality. This is how I want to show myself.
So I think a huge part of self-awareness comes in stillness and quietness. I think that as creatives, our minds are always sort of busy. We're always dreaming. There's a lot of dreaming. There's a lot of ideating that's happening. But the more that your mind is loaded with different things, and even the worlds that we have today, or the world that we're in today, everybody is moving at 50,000 miles per hour. Everything is flying. It's moving so fast, so rapidly.
True.
And again, if you are in something that's so fast, you get caught up. You don't even have any moment to center yourself, right? If you know, like some of the big fashion designers, a lot of times when they want to sort of come up with a new collection, they would travel, or they would sort of lock themselves up, or they will go to some hideout, or they will just distance themselves from maybe their everyday lives, or their teams, or their clients, or they just sort of go away so that things become a bit more clear. So if you haven't sort of done the work, which I had to do, and it's a work that does take time, so you have to be patient with being able to sort of take some time out, not years and years and years, obviously. You want to sort of not make sure that that's prolonged, but you want to take the time out to discover, to be still, to be quiet, to not be looking at every trend that is happening at every minute. Even sometimes the way the mind works, when you start looking at things that are happening, that's the only thing your mind is able to produce. You're not able to innovate. You're not able to sort of create anything new or be original, right? The originality comes from being in touch with your actual self, not being in touch with the internet, not being in touch with everybody else, right? What everybody else is doing. And I think that you have to be unapologetic about your style or your aesthetic. Because when there is clarity in that is when your people find you. That is when your market finds you.
How did you come up about bridal styling? Was it a new concept in Nigeria that you're trying to bring on, or like what made you, go into bridal styling?
Okay, yeah, it was a very new concept in Nigeria. It was almost unheard of. But I don't think that bridal styling itself is absolutely new. We've been bridal styling for years and years and years as a society, right? What is bridal styling? It's just, helping brides put together outfits that, make them feel like themselves and make them feel beautiful, make them look beautiful, right? We've just been doing it with more traditional methods. I think my journey into bridal styling started very, very young. As early as the age of 4 and 5, I've absolutely been in love with weddings. I love weddings as a young child. If I didn't get invited to a wedding, that was almost like the end of my week. I needed to go to that wedding as a child and just let me know you a bit. Just let me or my parents know you a bit. And I'm not on that bridal train they like, that I just feel so left out. So, like I'm missing out on something huge. I just loved weddings. I loved the garments. I loved the outfits. I loved the pageantry of it. I loved that the bride walked down the aisle very slowly. I loved the ceremony and all the, and all the things that came with it. And, of course, the party, the food, the change of mood of even most people, the love, the stories, everything, I've always loved about weddings. And also as young as 4 and 5, I've always loved fashion as well. So fashion was something that I was born in. I was born into a family of, fashionistas, people who liked fashion. The men and women in my family all love fashion. My grandmother was a seamstress. She made clothes for people. She had a design book. One of my cousins has that. She inherited that design book because there was just so many people before me who were into fashion or love fashion or have the passion for fashion. So it didn't even quite get to me, that book. But as early as 5, I remember threading my grandmother's needle. Because we had machines at our house. She lived with us at the time, so there's machines at our house. And I remember her calling me, "Tammy, come and help me thread this needle." And I would come thread the needle. I would just sit beside her, and the noise and the sound of the machine was just so soothing to me. That pedaling on on the machine, the sound of it was just really comforting for me. And I've always and she had clothes. My mom is also a big loves clothes. My dad loves fashion and just have very authentic and very different sense of style. Both of them very different, but very strong sense. So I grew up around that. I grew up watching that. So my journey to fashion and weddings had started that early. And I think by 8, you couldn't pick out my clothes for me. I had to pick it out. I had to style it. I had to put things together. I remember I would lay out down to my hair ribbons. I would lay them out beside my shoes, my skirt, my blouse. I remember giving fashion advice to my friends at 10 years old. I remember calling them and sitting them down, saying, "See, you need to stop wearing dresses. Dresses are for little girls." I remember that conversation. That friend of mine is in Canada right now. I'm sure she will see this. And I was like, "See, it's skirts and blouses. That is what we wear now. We're 10, okay? Like, you have to pair it like this." I remember that conversation. I will never forget. I'm sure now she sees me and she's like, So it's sort of come that early. And so by the time I was in secondary school, that those times in secondary school when it's time for you to get into senior secondary school and you have to pick between science, business, or art. I remember being so confused at that time because I remember not seeing anything in society that I really wanted to be. Like there was no occupation, what do you want to be where you grew up? And everybody's like,
doctor,
firefighter,
lawyer.
Police, doctor, lawyer, banker. I didn't feel like being a doctor.
Engineer,
I didn't connect to engineer. Architect was the farthest. Like I was just like, so would I be somebody, because I can't see it. So it really confused me because I think at that time they had even put me in science class. And I remember the principal on that day saying, if you're in science class, maybe you'll be a doctor. And so you need to love to read. You will read. You will be in school for a very long time. I just got up. I just got up and moved.
What an introduction.
And I was like, that doesn't sound like me. I'm not trying to be in school for so long, and I just moved and I looked at the arts section. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm overly artsy because I also love numbers. one of my favorite subjects in school was mathematics. I really, really, I love numbers. I love numbers. For me, it's like an art because it's so dependable. It's consistent,
Right.
so you can always add 2 + 2 and it's always going to be 4. And then if you sort of remove the formula and you put it backwards, it will get you right back where you started from.
Correct.
So I love that. I love that. So I was like, okay, let me just stay in the middle. I'm going to be in the business class. I'm neither, I'm neither going to be in the art class, nor am I going to be in the science class. So I'll just stay here. And it was great because I also come from a family of entrepreneurs. My entire family is a family of entrepreneurs. So I think for me, I was like, okay, this is a good step. And I think by the time I got to college, the whole, just weddings was still there, fashion. So everybody knew me as, the person who loved fashion and you could call for fashion advice. And so when it came time to their wedding, they would just call me, my friends, my cousins, they would just call me, please follow me to the dress shop. I want to buy something, and I'll say, no, don't get that. That's not nice. And I think I learned it. So I didn't quite go to fashion school or anything. I went to business school. But fashion has always been a part of me. And, I sort of learned, I guess I'm a self-taught bridal stylist.
Wow. I want you to talk to us about what was that experience like? I remember, like I said, when you came and you said, Fee, come on. You called me Fee because I go by Fee, but as well, but most people know me as Mo now. But yeah, you said Fee, I want to have this logo. I want you to design this logo. I remember saying you needed a brochure. I was like, hey, this person, just back, everything I was like, okay, so I remember saying okay, this logo, let me give you my ideas, and you're like, nah, hold on, no, this is exactly what I want. Okay. You're you're literally holding my hand, draw it like this. And then, we created our brochure, and then you just went, and then boom, I just started seeing your things on Instagram, wow, I was there, I was the one, I was there. So talk to us about that experience, coming into that space as probably one of the first. Like I said, I don't know much, but I feel like from most people's point of view, you were one of probably one of the first people that really made a niche out of bridal styling in Lagos, as far as I know. So what was the experience like coming to a new space, coming to that new already existing bridal sector, and you already have people that are probably doing something like that in a different way, and then you now coming to put some structure and just kind of shaping that place in a way, so what was it like?
So it was 2014 when Lavish got incorporated, when we actually started Lavish. So by the time I came to you, that was sort of I think 2016, 2017, early 2017. I had sort of been doing it for about 3 years.
Really?
At the time, I was in the US. I had a 9 to 5. I was in wealth management. So because I went to school, I studied economics for my first degree. So very far from anything creative.
You need to give us that tea.
I told you
you need to give us that tea about how you left a stable 9 to 5 in the US to come to the trenches.
It was definitely something that I don't want to say that it was a fearless experience, because looking back, it looks like it was a fearless experience. But I think I doubt that there are a lot of people in the world that don't deal with fear. I think that people just do it afraid. At least the people that do it afraid. And so I had been doing that 9 to 5 job, and I was sort of in a role that I thought I learned from. It was not, I don't regret being in that role at all. I did operations and, wealth management. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I sort of got to a point where I was like, you know, I'm getting paid, you know, the pay is good, but something's missing. I felt almost like I was selling my soul. That's sort of how I would describe it. I felt like I was selling my soul in exchange for money. And I think that my upbringing is one where, you know, where I was taught to be driven. I was taught to go after my dreams. I was taught that I could do anything, but I was also taught that money was not the ultimate, right? And so it was comfortable. I was traveling leisurely. I was able to do a lot of things. I was able to save really well. I was able to invest very early on, because I got that job actually before I even left school. I already had a job in hand before I finished my 400 level. So it was just like a very natural, very easy, you know, transition from school to like working. And so at the time when I made the decision to leave, it was a large part to do with how I felt and how I felt like I wasn't doing what I was meant to do, or, you know, I wasn't doing what I was called in life to do. But there was also a lot of other issues, and I just decided, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to leave. And so I left for Nigeria after having, you know, done bridal styling on the side for family, for friends, for their friends, and things like that. Obviously, in those years, I was freelance. I didn't get paid for any of those. I did it. I loved it. I enjoyed it. Worked with some of the biggest photographers in Maryland, in the US at the time. And by the time it was, I think 2015, I was back in Nigeria. And I stayed for like a year doing my NYSC, and then I left again for my MBA. So I got an MBA at Texas A&M University, Mays Business School, and I did that for about a year and a half. And so when I got back to school, again, I was faced with the same issues, right? I got back to my MBA class, and everybody was like, there was almost like tracks, right? It was a general MBA, but then there was like tracks. So there was the people who they already knew they were going into consulting. So they were already sort of taking some extra courses to go into there. When I say consulting, I mean like management consulting, like the traditional one. Some people knew that they were going into like supply chain management. So the people that were going to Amazon and places like that, they were already sort of told, or like Honda, right? You know, they were already going through like, you know, and I was looking at them like, supply what? You know, and the people that were going through accounting, people who wanted to sort of go do accounting with like HP and some of those big companies, they were already sort of towing that line. And I honestly felt like the only person in the class, right? We were not a lot of women in the MBA class, so we were very few. And then we were only 2 Black women, so 2, you know, women from Africa, or just, you know, of our race, right? And so I was several stages and oddity in that environment. Okay, so you know, by the time it was like consulting, supply chain, you know, tech, or you know, and I didn't fit. And I remember in class I would just be on. I would like maybe it'd be accounting class, because that's my least favorite subject, and I would just be in accounting class and I would be hovering through wedding dresses. And people at my back of maybe would have thought that I was getting married. I was not getting married. I didn't have any kind of engagement. I was not looking at those wedding dresses for myself. That was my world. I was so happy, so content, so at home in the world of anything bridal. Like I just would be going through websites, Rosa Clara, Vera Wang, and just be accessing the necklines, the, you know, the silhouettes, the models. I would just sort of be looking at that. I think a few people spotted that, and now they send me messages and say, actually, you were always looking at bridal stuff, right? So by the time, I was wrapping that degree up, I sort of sat with myself and I said, if not now, then when? Do I go, like, I left that, that career that I had before doing finance because I felt like I was not doing what I was meant to do. If I follow the money, right, and go into one of these paths that are easily in front of me, then am I not going back? Am I not going back to where I was coming from, where I was not content with what I was doing? Not because it didn't pay well, but just because it just wasn't me, right? And so I said to myself, yeah, I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. And at that point, it felt like I was at a cliff, and I either needed to go back to safety or I just needed to jump. And so I felt like my word at that time was jump. And if you know anything about jumping, especially off a cliff, it just throws all, kind of, all logical senses out. And at that point, it's like, I'm going to just do this and see where it leads me. Obviously, I wasn't jumping right off a literal cliff, but I knew that this was the time. At that time, I was still single. I didn't have any big responsibilities. I had sort of spent all the money that I'd saved working to going back to school for my MBA. So at that point, I was like, let's see, I don't have any debt. I've invested. This is the time to see what can come out of this thing that keeps tugging at my core, And so at that point I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to come to Nigeria. At the time there was, one or two bridal stylists or dedicated bridal stylists in the US. But in Nigeria, I didn't see any bridal stylists by the time I was coming back. And so I came back and I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm jumping. So everything that I was doing at that time was risk. I was taking risks because obviously I learned that during the MBA. In business, you take calculated risks. I obviously done some market research. I had looked at the bridal landscape in Nigeria. I had seen like a gap. I had seen a lot of brides who were needing help. I had seen the scattered bridal stores, a few bridal designers at the time. The industry was very fragmented. At that time, planners had just, like, having a wedding planner for your wedding had just become a thing. Like, it was no longer oh, my auntie, we plan it, and stuff like that. It was now like a thing. Everybody was having planners. And so I realized at the time that I had several customers, right? I had several customers. The planners were one of my customers. The brides themselves were one of my customers. And then the bride's family, typically the mom, the auntie, the sisters, were also my customers. And I had to figure out what were their motivations, what the benefits of what I wanted to offer was to them. And I had to figure out how to communicate that to them. So by the time we came up with that logo, I remember it was very minimal, very lavish, and the bridal was underneath. I have to also say that, the vision was also bigger than bridal styling, because I knew at that time that I had a knack for advising people, advisory. I had spent some time in consulting. I loved consulting. I loved looking at a problem and sort of preferring solutions. I knew that I loved design. I knew that I loved detail, lush fabrics. I knew that I loved accessories. I knew those things. So Lavish Bridal was, always meant to be a big bridal fashion house. But at that time, obviously, like I said, I had spent all my money going back to school, getting an MBA. So at that point, I looked at it and I said, look, the time is now. I looked and I was like, I don't have all this capital to start. How? And at that point, strategy was one of my strengths, because the MBA teaches you to be very strategic. And I said, you know what? I have this drive. I have this talent. I have a laptop. I had one at the time. I have access to the internet. I don't have this capital. What do I start with that I do not need capital? And that part of consulting and styling was my answer. And it was very needed in the industry at the time. There were already designers. Right. There were already planners. There were already, people who sold accessories, but there was no bridal stylist. So I said, you know what, this is a differentiation, this is a differentiation. And it doesn't need capital. So I'm going to start with it. And I remember starting out in my dad's living room, with my computer. I just put it on my legs, and I just was going off on that. And, once the logo was live, once the brochure was live, I remember just having to go into people's offices around Lagos, pitching, especially to planners, and letting them see because of course planners are always looking for things to make the lives of their clients easier and their lives easier, honestly, because if the planning is easy, then the planner is able to really execute properly. So, a bride who is bawling and crying is not a planner's dream; it's a nightmare. So, we had to really explain the benefit to them, because even in the beginning there was a lot of pushback from family. I am your auntie. I was there when they brought you out. It was me that carried you like this. And on your wedding, it's not me that will pick your fabric. No.
Oh my
no,
days.
I'm the one that picks for all the family members when we do the party. And so there was just this pushback. I was almost like the enemy. Yorubas even have a saying that or something like that. Like, it's almost like this girl is coming to steal my birthright of being the one, and even the moms were not happy because they're like, this is my baby girl. Sometimes mothers will come and say, this is my only daughter. I almost felt like I was in possession of. It was so interesting.
That nobody tells.
So you have to get their buy-in. You have to get their buy-in. You have to. So we spent, at Lavish, we spent the first few years literally trying to educate. Those first few years were not for making money. It's now that people are sort of making money out of bridal styling because we've done that foundational work of educating. Because even at that time, people needed the service, but a lot of people didn't know that they needed the service. They didn't know. It was just like when the iPhone came, like everybody was like, no, I already have a camera. I don't need a device that can help me talk and take pictures, And so it was until it came that people were like, wait, whoa, we actually need this.
Wow, a lot to unpack on that one. That was a lot. So I think it's so nice to hear these stories, because I bet I didn't know all these things even happened, the story about having to get the buy-in. When you say it now, it makes a lot of sense, because I'm like, this is actually true. You have to wage war with family. Even I feel like even the couple have to even battle out family on their own already.
Oh yes.
with decision making, choosing things already. So now how much more someone that is on the outside, coming from the external to come and influence major decisions, such as picking not just the wedding dress, even other outfits as well. So I think it makes a lot of sense telling our story, and it's so relatable. So at what point did you actually feel like you've proven people now believe, and there's that buying, they now understand the value that you're offering? At what point was it?
I think at the point when people started to advocate, when the brides themselves started to advocate for us. When the bride started to so when your customer starts to advertise for you without you doing that work, then you know that you've done the work. So we started having brides call us and say, oh, I've seen your page, I love your work, I want you to style me. Some brides would message us and say, when I get married, I don't have anybody. I'm not seeing anyone. I don't know when that is, but when I get
But
married, it
whenever?
will be you,
Wow.
And we will get on consultations, and you will hear the bride say, oh, I also have my mom and my auntie here, and you can just hear the in the mom's voice. You can just hear the like, why, what is it? And then the bride is like, no, mommy, they do this and they do that and they do this. And so you are like, you're like in the consultation,
so
like,
peculiar.
you're in the consultation, like the bride is the one that is hosting the consultation at that point, because she's like, oh, mommy, they're going to do this and they're going to do that. I even sent you the link to what I told you that I saw, can't you see that? And then you hear the mom say, yeah, it's nice, it's nice, it's nice. Okay, madam. Okay. But at the end of the day, you see that the moms come on board, there's just that hesitance, but by the time that we started getting on consultations, and it was the brides or their daughters that was sort of leading the consultation, I knew that, we had done our work. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, I'm happy to hear that, and the stories are so relatable. Again, like mothers are like they're like custodians of so many things.
They have to
They're like
guide
custodians of their style, of their families, of like that African parents character. You can ask a Ghanaian and they will tell you the same thing. Like they guard everything. Like no, nobody don't come and steal my birthright or my heritage. I don't know why we have that. I don't know why they have that. Why we have
it's
that.
Good. It's good culture though.
Yeah. So we've just been speaking about your journey so far with Lavish Bridal, but now you've started to do other things. You've kind of like, I won't say pivot, but you've kind of like expanded or extended into other facets, which is you started going into women's fashion through your Lavish brand. And I saw like your collection and your photo shoot. I saw like this very lush, outdoorsy, very, beach wear, like kind of vibe, going on. And I mean, it still speaks to like your style, like that. There's that aesthetic still coming across through those things. And recently you mentioned traveling to go and get some things. So I know you mentioned at some point, like, the vision wasn't to just do styling. Like the vision was to, if I believe I get what you're saying correctly, there was like an entry strategy into the market to establish a niche, and then people get to know you, know your brand, and then you can now expand and extend into. I think you've always said this in a way from like way back, and now it's coming back to me now. So now doing that, like how did you come up with this concept of like, creating this women's wear, and what has that been like for you, like creating this new brand? And are you kind of like downsizing on the women on this bridal styling part? Is it something that you're still doing, or are you facing away from that? So like, can you talk to us through that?
Okay. So I think that when we started, our vision was very clear, right? Which is to have this world-class fashion brand that pretty much just helped women. I think at my very core, I love to see people happy. I love to see people satisfied, not satisfied necessarily with a service, but satisfied within themselves, that they have accomplished what they set out to, or accomplished something that sort of checks a goal for them, whether they imagined it that way or not, right? If they feel like, on this day, I want to feel like my best self, even if they'd not imagined the details of that, but on that day they do feel like their best self. That's what I love to see. That's what I love to do. And so at the very core of Lavish, it will always be about that. And bridal styling being an entry level strategy, I think worked. And so I think that one of the reasons why we started with women's wear, and sort of women's wear for for the purposes that we started it, which is sort of like other events, vacation, evening wear, things like that, is because as we started to do the styling and we started to, the way I see it is send brides off into the world, send brides off into the rest of their lives. They started coming back. Okay. So the brides started to come back and call us and say, oh, I have this really nice wedding I'm going to, I need something to wear, help me. We were the people that helped them look the best that they wanted to look like on the wedding day. So they naturally came back to us. And it seems like we didn't have a solution for them, because a lot of times they would come and I'll say, oh, let me design something for you really quickly. But we'll have to go and make it here. And then they'll say, Timmy, it's tomorrow. And I'm like, wait, what?
What?
Wait, what? They'll be like, oh, I've been so busy. I just completely forgot about it. I said I was going to find something somewhere. Some of them will say, I said I was going to find something somewhere, but I just couldn't find anything that I really liked. Everything was just sort of casual. I need something really nice, really nice. And at the time in Nigeria, we really had a huge culture of everything bespoke. If it was going to be ready to wear, it was very, very casual. It was very very casual, right? And so if you needed something that was elevated, something that was more for like a more dressy occasion, then you needed to make it from scratch, which a lot of people, like I said, the time factor was a problem for these women in the first. It was a problem during their weddings. It's still going to be a problem now, right? So we definitely needed to come up with a women's wear line or women's wear pieces that they could just grab and go. They could just pick and it was elevated enough that they could wear to a wedding. It was elevated enough that they could, wear on date night, or, something that they wanted to dress up for, or like and I think there's the culture of people buying new clothes for vacation. That's been prevalent for some years now. And in vacation, they want to look nice. They've worked the whole year and they now have some weeks where they just want to, relax, and they don't want to look like the bomb that they maybe feel like they've been looking for the past how many months. And so they want to look nice, and everything is casual. And, there are times during vacation that you want to dress up nice, you want to go dinner and things like that. And there was just not a lot of accessible pieces for them to do that. And so I said to myself, we can't keep letting these women down. And so we started to, so I took sort of my legs off the pedal for styling. And I said to myself, okay, I want to explore, because again, as a creative, I do not like to be boxed. In fact, I tell people not to call me Lavish, because a lot of people call me that. They call me Lavish. Lavish! And I'm like, no, that's not my name. No, because it's so important that you don't put me in that box. As much as Lavish is a well-known brand, and it's great, and it's a solid part of my life, it is not who I am, and so I'm just like, no, don't call me Lavish. I can decide I want to be somebody else tomorrow, get with it. At that point, I want to be known for something else.
Found a new name for you now.
not Lavish. Lavish is great, but yeah, you get what I'm
I think
trying
there's a
to
time I
say.
stored your name as Temi Lavish. I think
Okay, Temi Lavish is okay. You know what? Temi Lavish is actually fine. Temi Lavish is fine.
Okay.
But you see, that's removing the Temi part and the
just removing Temi and just slamming Lavish.
No,
only you.
No. Indiana said, "I'm not my hair. I'm not my business. It's one. It's what I do. It's what I do. It's what I do." So I said to myself, let me see what I can create. And I think it's so shocking to me that we've just been doing the women's wear full time for just about a year and maybe 2-3 months now. And it feels like we have done the work of 5 years in a year. I
Wow.
honestly think, every time I think about it, I think it's quite remarkable. And I'm not one to, pat myself on the back and say, oh, I haven't arrived. We definitely haven't
You
arrived.
can,
But
why not?
I just think for the team that we have a very small team, and we have done such remarkable work. I can tell when, I connect with people, because we also do tours during the summer around different cities in the world. This year we have done Accra, Ghana, and we have done Abuja. And just the feedback from people, it's just been so amazing to see the girlies, having saved lavish pieces on their saved folder, sharing it in their girl groups, dreaming about it, wanting to get there, connecting with certain pieces, because that's another thing with us as a brand. How we're different and why we're different is that we're not just designers. We have the wealth of experience of being stylists. And what stylists do is personalize fashion. So we come with the experience of personalizing fashion to people, and then fusing that with readily available pieces. What that means is that each dress has a persona. Each dress speaks of someone or somebody at a particular time of their life. So we almost have a dress for when you're feeling sexy. We have a dress for when you're feeling flirty. We have a dress for when you're feeling strong and bold and powerful. We have a dress for people who are introverted. We have a dress for people who are more extroverted or classic. We have a dress called Dia. Dia is like a halter neck, and it's a plain color. It's muted, and it's just a flowy dress. That is a dress for somebody who's minimalist but still wants this glam, because it has like a little train at the back from the neck, so it's a bit exaggerated, right? And then we have one of our bestsellers, our mesh dresses, that is very form fitted. So that same girl who wanted to feel classy and sophisticated but minimal, the next minute she can open up and say, I'm sexy. So she picks that dress and she is sexy, right? So it's almost like the dresses are already personalized. It's just at that point, who do you want to be? Who are you? What do you want to say? Because fashion speaks, right? So that is how we're different from any other designer that you can possibly see anywhere in the world.
Wow, that's a story. That's the pitch. That's a strong pitch. It's good to tell these things. It's good to. I hope you've done this. You've actually told this story in this way, because I'm visualizing everything in my head now, and it's making a lot of sense. I love it. I love how you're very intentional and very specific about exactly what you're trying to do with your pieces. That's actually good. Temi, it's been so nice hearing you speak about your pieces and the inspiration behind them, and your why you're doing them, and what makes them different. I think it was such a good story hearing that. What's actually peculiar about them. I think that was my first time actually hearing that clearly, and that was a good one. So I'll ask now, what's your vision? What are your plans for like the near future? Are you planning to scale this into like retail stores, or are you planning to have your own retail store? What are your plans like for Lavish?
Okay, so I can't say much or give too much detail, but what I can say is that be prepared to see a lot more from us. I think that the vision is huge, right? And we are we are going for goals. Like, we are expanding, we are niching down into, because again, I think that really solving the problem of the headache of thinking of where to get these things for women is a big, you can't solve that with just one thing, right? I think that you have to sort of create a more robust solution, which we are working on doing, and we're doing it one at a time. I don't want to say I'm in no rush. I also like to see the end result of things. It's one of the reasons why I used to get really emotional on brides' wedding days, and I would start to cry, and the bride would say, "Baby, don't cry," and then they would start to cry, and I'll have to run away and go somewhere else. Because just seeing everything come together is always so fulfilling. And I think that gets frustrating, especially for creatives, because when you're a creative, a lot of times you are in the weeds of the details, and so you can't see, the finished product till you see it. And so sometimes you're beating up yourself in the middle of it. And I'm talking to myself because it happens with me as well. Just that gratification, delayed gratification, is such a thing in the creative space, because sometimes you can be creating and nobody connects with this, or you feel like nobody is connecting. But the truth is that people are watching. The truth is that people are watching, and the day they will speak, that is when you will know that actually you were actually making a difference.
If you were to advise a younger you, let's say a 17-year-old you, what would you tell her? That Temi that is just about to leave secondary school, I think around then, thereabouts.
I had left. I had left.
Oh, you had left. Okay.
I had left.
Fair enough.
I had left.
16-year-old you. Yeah.
No, I think 17-year-old me is good. I had left secondary school at the time. I was sort of trying to work my way to go to school in the States, which I had known I wanted to do since I was 10. And I just sort of, I just knew that I wanted to do that. And so I think at that point, at 17, I was already so driven. I was already such a go-getter. I remember, having all my files, all my books, walking into the US Embassy in Abuja. They had an education section called EAC. And I remember just going there. They had like a library and a space for you to study for your SATs, for you to do applications to universities. And sort of, they had some mentors there, and some really great people that I met. A lot of those people are still in my network today and my friends. And I remember feeling like it wasn't going to work. I remember feeling, because I remember I tried to make it work the first time and it didn't quite come together, and I was sort of feeling very lost. And I think at that point I felt like my life was over. I really thought my life was over, because I really wanted this more than anything. And I think what I would say to my 17-year-old me, do it knowing that you have triumphed. Do it. Keep doing it, knowing, because I'm also a very big believer in God. And I feel like one of the revelations that I got recently is sort of surrounding the resurrection of Jesus, right? When you sort of have something like that happen, right? Which was sort of like a successful, like it was more successful than the outcome that you would think to have expected in such a situation, right? And so for me, if that had happened and that kind of was like a more successful outcome than you had anticipated, then for me, that's a possibility for me, because I operate under the same covenant. So for me, I want to remind myself, or tell my 17-year-old self, keep working like you have succeeded, you have triumphed, you have gotten it, because what I can see now is that a lot of the things that I dreamt of then, I've seen happen, right? A lot of the fulfillment that has come, a lot of the exposure, a lot of the, the access that I have sort of seen now, or sort of, that I've sort of seen now, I dreamt about it, and I thought that wasn't going to happen when I was 17. And I think it's not just when you're 17 that happens to you. I think every day we wake up with every morning we wake up with some sort of question mark. What's going to happen? I don't think any of us know. I think I think every day we wake up with that question mark. And every time you see somebody get up and go after their day, they have to replace that question mark with a certain level of hope, right? That if I get up today, it would either happen today or it will happen soon. Right? So I think every day we have to replace uncertainty with hope. We have to, so we have to replace uncertainty with hope. And what I've seen is that the saying of winners never quit and quitters never win is so true, right? You keep going. And even if you don't succeed at this one outlet of creativity that you are currently pursuing, find the next one. That might be the one. Find the next one. That might be the one. Find the next one. That keep going, because if you quit, then you will never know which one it is that you find. But everything that you're sort of facing is adding to the richness of your story, and it's adding to the richness of what you would eventually be able to give, right? It's not that one day you just be like this successful filmmaker, and then you landed literally from your mother's womb right there. But it's the collective, putting together of all your experiences, every tear, every struggle, every hardship, every failure, every shut door, every opportunity that has led you to becoming this particular person that has now succeeded in this one thing. Because I can tell you, my dad didn't succeed selling cows. Succeeded something else, something completely different, but he just had to keep going. And you have to keep going, you have to keep trying, you have to know that at some point something will click, something will work. At least you have to maintain that optimism. If not, you will just stop, so and again, that's why as a creative, you don't let anybody box you. Keep going. Take your learnings. Even if you can't you feel like it's not transferable, it will come in. It will come in. It will come in handy. Right now, we're a lot focused on our women. We still have our styling clients, but we're a lot focused on our women's, where a lot of times it shocks me how much I'm able to read my clients' minds. And I'm like, sometimes I say, oh yeah, of course, I understand what you're talking about. And deep down, I'm like, how do I understand that? But why I understand that, when I think about it, is because I've spent years, and a lot of those years were not fun. I spent years really, really, really applying myself and really going deep into this creative world of styling, and really, and it comes to, while maybe somebody else their approach to styling might be like, you want a V-neck? Yes, V-neck. Okay, we attach V-neck with a mermaid dress. Voila, dress! And then, that's it. My approach is different into, let me understand where you come from. Let me understand your story. Let me understand your nuances. Let me understand your why. When I understand your why, then I can say, okay, let's do a Queen Anne neckline. But how does your why connect to the style of neckline? It's only because I've sort of stayed and really, really gotten in touch. And if nothing even ever comes out of it, what I say is, at least I've gotten the chance to experience the creativity of the creator of the world, right? I've gotten the chance to manifest a little bit of his sprinkle, at least I've gotten that chance, because it is so exhilarating. Like, imagine you being the creative that came up with the world, the way the mountains look, the way imagine being the creative that came up with it. But then imagine that you, obviously, your limited capacity can't do that, but you could do a little bit. You could create a dress. You could do a little bit. Pleasure. And I think that I feel like that's a huge honor, a huge privilege.
It's a honor.
I don't think anything can replace that. Yeah.
So Temi, another question for you is basically how working as a creative, as a woman in Nigeria as a mom, as a wife, now as an entrepreneur, like, traveling, doing businesses, having consulting to wives, to brides and families. I could imagine that would be a lot of work. So how have you been able to balance that with, doing everything else that you're doing, being a wife, being a mom to two amazing girls, and, having your husband, having a home, all those responsibilities. What are some of the things that how have you been able to manage that balance, in your work?
Yeah, I'm starting to think that there's no such thing as balance.
Okay, here we go again.
I'm starting to think that there's nothing like that.
I feel like I've heard that thing so many times this last few weeks.
You see that balance. I think people romanticize it until they've lived through it.
Oh my God, balance.
Work-life balance.
Oh my God, balance.
I just think that
my weekends off. Yeah.
At least balance in the way that it is said. I don't think that there's anything like that, especially when you're juggling so many different important things. I think I don't think that there is balance. I think what there are is seasons. There are seasons, right?
Wow.
And I think that the seasons call for different things, and the seasons look different, right? So.
I think you need an
I
extra
remember
mic. I need you to make this louder.
They're just seasons. Some things suffer in some seasons. You can't go to winter and be shouting that there is no fruit on the tree. You can't be telling us that, but you want a balance in there should also snow should fall, but then all the trees should be filled with flowers and fruit. It doesn't work that way. There is seasons, not balance, and in each season you have to know what season that you are, and as a woman you have to manage it.
Amen.
Number one.
Amen.
But you have to also be kind to yourself, right? In those seasons, because some seasons are harder than the other. I remember when I first got married, and we were just married and newly married, and I was doing Lavish. It was so great. I was going out, by the time I would come back, my husband would have, we would have talked about, what do you want to eat? Okay, maybe we should get something. Okay, maybe we should, and it would just, and it was good. Okay, you are out with a client. Okay. And then it quickly turned to, okay, we need to start having kids. And then I started to go through issues of miscarriages, right? And you still need to get up and go to work, right? How do you balance that, And I remember losing out on a lot of opportunities at that time because a lot of times I won't even be conscious, I would, have to go to the hospital, go through all these different procedures. How do you want to, especially for a new business? My business was new, so it wasn't as if I had started putting structures in place for it to run without me. At that time, it couldn't run without me. So a lot of times that balance, the clients were not, they might not have felt that balance. And even I think for me, I was so lucky in the sense that I feel personally that God manages my calendar for me. So I remember a client that I really wanted at the time, and she was already going to lock us in, hire us, and last minute she just said, she's not going to, she's not going to go ahead, and she's going to go ahead with somebody. And I was completely confused because it was through, a referral, very strong referral. We had met, we had clicked, we had already started talking about, what she was going to wear. She was even going to pay at that moment. She said, let her quickly get, it was already a done deal. And I remember that I felt very I felt like I'd missed that opportunity. And then fast forward to the bride's wedding day, I was in the hospital. I had landed in the hospital, and I was thinking to myself, look at God. God literally saved me from that, because I literally went to, I landed in the hospital. My phone was not anywhere near me. So the bride would have had her wedding, not been able to contact her stylist, not been able to figure out what was going on. I would have not been able to communicate, and that would have just been a huge mess. And it was something that was not planned. And I was thinking to myself, God saved her, God saved me, and so, and so you have times like that when you're down and out. And by the time the kids actually started to come, I remember walking into the labor room, talking on the phone about a client, talking. The bride had her wedding that day. By this time I had sort of put structures in place, talking to my team. And of course, I'm out for a couple of days, having a baby. And then by the time I come back, and I have to lean on my team a bit more at that time. They have to sort of be front and center. I can't be front and center. Personally, I've been privileged to have a great support system, with my family, and, just having them filling sometimes for me, filling in the spaces that I need to fill in. And also just being able to think about what my strengths are, thinking about what I want to focus my limited time on, focusing on that, and finding structures and people to balance the rest, which is some of the reasons I'm still in Nigeria, because, you can't get some of those things easily, in different parts of the world. So that's how I've been able to manage it. But I think the word is seasons, and managing seasons rather than balance, because sometimes it's skewed towards the kids. Sometimes it's skewed. You hear sometimes you call designers and they're like, please, I want to spend time with my family. It's Sunday, and of course we had to sort of put some guards, some checks and balances in place. We had to sort of come up with a contract, a very clear contract. We had to come up with a modus operandi of working, so that people, because in the beginning, brides will call you at 3 a.m. I can't sleep. I need, I need to talk to you about this dress and stuff. And you are, and in the beginning of my marriage, that was still okay. I would get up, I would, sneak out of the room and have those conversations. But now when I need to be up at 5 to start getting the kids ready for school, I can't do that. So now, we have to sort of set that modus operandi, set the expectation in the beginning, and let them know that our stylists are accessible, available between this time and this time.
That's good. I definitely understand. I mean, I've heard a number of stories and a number of experiences of, similar stories, and, the challenges of being a woman and being, able to build structure and, build a sustainable business. And I think you should definitely talk on that and have conversations on that. So we're coming to the end. And this is where we ask our reflective questions. So basically, I'll ask you a question that we ask every guest on the podcast, which is that what are you currently doing to become a better version of yourself?
I'm working on becoming a better businesswoman. I'm working on my tenacity, because like I said, winners never quit and quitters never win. And so I think as creatives, there is a gray area when to leave that creative outlet that you currently are in and focus on another one. I don't know if you get what I mean. So like, at what point do you say, I've tried enough on this mountain, let me move somewhere else and start creating a different way? Maybe start creating differently, or start creating something else, right? And so I think that requires you to be intelligent on a different level. And that's what I mean by a better business woman. And that also requires you to be tenacious, because, like I said, creativity a lot of times is a thankless job. And it only gets to a place where it starts becoming actually rewarding in terms of maybe cash or financially. And so that tenacity is what I'm also trying to apply every day. Like I said, you wake up every day with a question mark. You have to erase that uncertainty with hope. I think they say you have to almost be blind. You have to almost be blind or sort of be delusional. I think that's the word. You have to almost be delusional, right? Sometimes. And I think I'm a bit more of a realist, so I'm trying to also, become even more delusional, so I can attain, I can sort of reach those places that I know that I can get to. So yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Temi, and you've been listening to the Hungry Creative Podcast.